Hey guys, tonight, we are taking a trip to the original home of family drama, a place with more feuds, scandals, and questionable decision-making than a stack of tabloid magazines. We are heading to Mount Olympus, the glittering cloud-veiled palace of the Greek gods. We're not going to be a hero on a quest or a king seeking a prophecy. Nope, we are going to be a guest at the most chaotic and high-stakes family dinner party in the universe. A word of warning, you'd probably get turned into a spider or a shrub before the appetizers were served. So it is a good thing you're just listening. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support means the world. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments what city you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step through a gateway that isn't really a gateway, into a hall that isn't really a hall. The air here is different, thrumming with a low-level energy that makes the hairs on your arms stand up. The light isn't just bright, it is a liquid gold, pouring from a ceiling that seems to be the living sky itself. The sound is the first thing that hits you, a cacophony of booming laughter, the sharp notes of a lyre played with show-offish skill, and the constant, overlapping chatter of voices that are used to being obeyed. This is the great megaron of Olympus, the throne room and feasting hall of the gods. The scene before you is a lot. In the center of the room, on a massive golden throne, sits the king of it all, Zeus. He isn't throwing lightning bolts right now, but his booming voice dominates the space as he recounts a story, clearly for the 10th time, about a clever trick he played on some hapless mortal. Beside him, Queen Hera sits on her own throne, her expression a masterclass in regal side-eye, her gaze sharp and missing absolutely nothing. The rest of the family is a whirlwind of divine ego. There's Apollo, looking unfairly handsome, making his lyre sing a tune that competes with the loud, boisterous boasting of Ares, the god of war, who is recounting a battle with gory enthusiasm. Aphrodite, whose beauty is so overwhelming it's almost hard to look at, is the center of a small, swirling vortex of admiration and jealousy. It is, in short, the most powerful, most dysfunctional family gathering ever conceived. These are the Olympians, the 12 major deities of the Greek pantheon, whose dramatic, all-too-human personalities form the very bedrock of Greek mythology. Your eyes scan the room, taking in the spectacle. You see the thrones, magnificent carved seats of power for the ruling family. You try to count them, to get a sense of the core group, one for Zeus, one for Hera, Poseidon, Demeter. But it is confusing. The grouping seems fluid, the energy chaotic. And then you see her, away from the thrones, away from the arguments and the music and the drama. There is a point of stillness. In the very center of the vast hall is a great circular hearth, from which a single, steady, smokeless flame rises. And standing beside it, her back to much of the room's chaos, is a goddess. She is not plain, but she is simple. She is not attention, but she is impossible to ignore once you have noticed her. She is dressed in a simple veiled tunic of undyed wool. Her posture is calm, her movements deliberate and graceful as she tends to the fire. Her presence doesn't shout, it hums. It is a quiet, foundational note beneath the shrill music of the others. While they are all busy being gods, she is busy being the heart of the home. This is Hestia. You have stumbled upon a truly wonderful and niche fact of your visit. Hestia's name is not just a name. It is the ancient Greek word for hearth. She is not the goddess of the hearth. In a very real, tangible way, she is the hearth. That fire in the center of the room is her physical manifestation, the literal center of the Olympian home, and by extension, the symbolic center of the entire cosmos. This raises a question that has puzzled ancient Greeks and modern scholars alike. If she is so central, so foundational, why does she seem so overlooked? You look back at the thrones. The lineup of the 12 Olympians is one of the most famous concepts in mythology, but historians are still debating who exactly made the final cut. The list actually changes depending on which ancient author you read. In the most common lists, Hestia is there, one of the original 6 children of Kronos and Rhea. But in others, her throne is occupied by the much more dramatic, much more disruptive latecomer, Dionysus, the god of wine. You look at Hestia, her calm figure silhouetted against the eternal flame. She seems utterly unbothered by this ambiguity, by the fact that her place on the divine board of directors is a matter of some debate. Her power, you sense, does not come from a throne or a title. It comes from her position at the center of it all, from the quiet, undeniable fact that without the warmth of her fire, this grand chaotic palace would just be a cold, empty hall. You have just met the most important and the most invisible goddess on Olympus. You tear your gaze away from the high drama of the Olympian court, from the clash of divine egos and the memories of ancient oaths. You let your consciousness drift downwards, away from the glittering, golden peak of the mountain, down through the clouds, down to the solid, sun-baked earth of Greece. You are going to leave the world of the gods and enter the world of mortals. Because it is here, in the humble everyday lives of ordinary people, that Hestia's true power is felt. You find yourself standing in the courtyard of a modest Greek home, a simple whitewashed structure of mud brick and timber. The air is warm and smells of baking bread, olives, and the dust of a well-trod path. You step through an open doorway, not into a grand hall, but into the heart of the home. And what you find there is not a throne, but a hearth. In the center of the main room is a circular, slightly raised platform of stone and clay. A small, cheerful fire burns in its center, its flames licking at the sides of a bubbling clay pot, its smoke rising lazily towards a small open hole in the roof. This is the hearth. This is Hestia. In the world of ancient Greece, a house was not just a shelter. It was a family unit, an oikos, and the absolute physical and symbolic center of the oikos was the hearth. This is a mainstream historical fact, the bedrock of understanding daily life in ancient Greece. The house was literally built around this central fire. It was the source of warmth, the source of light in the dark hours, and the place where the family's food was cooked, transforming raw nature into civilized sustenance. You watch as the life of the home revolves around this single, steady flame. The mother of the family kneels by the hearth, skillfully turning a piece of flatbread on a hot stone. A small child, playing with a wooden toy, does not wander too far from its comforting warmth. The father, coming in from the fields, walks first to the hearth to warm his hands, a silent, unconscious gesture of homecoming. This fire is not just a utility, it is a sacred presence. Hestia is not a distant goddess who must be prayed to in a grand temple. She is here, a living, breathing part of the family. Her presence is in the crackle of the logs, the warmth on your skin, the smell of the cooking stew. She is the most intimate and the most constant of all the gods. This intimate connection leads to a fascinating and niche aspect of her worship. Hestia had very few, if any, grand public temples dedicated to her. This has led some to mistakenly believe she was a minor goddess, but the truth is the exact opposite. She didn't need grand temples because every single home in the Greek world was, in a very real sense, her temple. Her altar was the family hearth. Her priests and priestesses were the family members themselves. The rituals associated with her are woven into the very fabric of daily life. When a new baby is born into the family, one of the first and most important rites is a ceremony where the infant is carried around the hearth, formally introducing the new member to the goddess who will protect them. When a new bride marries into the family, her mother-in-law gives her a torch lit from the hearth of her new home, symbolizing the transfer of her domestic duties and her acceptance into the family line, all under Hestia's watchful eye. This raises a question that social historians and archaeologists still ponder. Given that the hearth was so central and was traditionally the domain of the women of the household, How much real, informal power did this give women within the patriarchal structure of Greek society? While men dominated the public sphere, politics, war, law, the private sphere, the oikos, was the woman. Hestia was its quiet, powerful matron goddess. Was the worship of Hestia a way of acknowledging and validating the immense foundational importance of women's work in a society that often overlooked it? The debate is ongoing. You watch the family gather around the hearth as evening falls. They are not performing a grand ceremony. They are simply living, but their every action is a quiet act of worship. The sharing of the food cooked on her fire, the telling of stories in her warm glow, the simple, unspoken comfort of being together in this central sacred space. It is all Hestia's domain. She is the goddess of the home, not in the sense of the physical building, but in the sense of the feeling of belonging, of stability, of continuity. She is the warm, beating heart of the family. Zeus may rule the sky, and Poseidon may rule the sea, but Hestia rules the one place that matters most to every mortal, the place you come back to at the end of the day, the place that is, and always will be, home. The sun has set on the small Greek farmhouse, and the family is gathered around the hearth, their faces illuminated by the soft, flickering light of Hestia's flame. The evening meal is over, and the father of the family performs one final quiet ritual before they all retire for the night. He takes a small portion of the wine from his cup and, with a murmured prayer, pours it directly onto the coals of the hearth. The wine sizzles, releasing a sweet, fragrant steam that rises with the smoke. It is a final offering, a thank you, a divine nightcap for the goddess of the home. This simple, domestic scene is a beautiful illustration of Hestia's role. But her honor extends far beyond the four walls of the private home. Her presence is required at every single meal, at every single gathering, no matter how grand or how humble. This is due to the decree that Zeus made after she took her vow of chastity, that she would receive the first and last offering at any feast or sacrifice. Now, let your consciousness drift from the quiet farmhouse to a much grander, more public affair. You find yourself in the feasting hall of a wealthy nobleman. The room is filled with dozens of men, reclining on cushioned couches, their heads adorned with wreaths of myrtle. The air is thick with the scent of roasted meat, expensive wine, and fragrant oils. A poet is reciting verses from Homer, his voice a dramatic, rhythmic chant. It is a symposium, a classic Greek drinking party, a place of politics, philosophy, and pleasure. But before the feasting can truly begin, a hush falls over the room. The host of the party rises, a golden cup of unmixed wine in his hand. He walks to the large, ornate hearth that dominates one side of the room. He does not address his guests. He addresses the fire. To Hestia first, he says. His voice clear and formal, he pours a libation of the pure wine onto the flames. This is the opening act. The party cannot begin. No food can be eaten. No wine can be drunk for pleasure until the goddess of the hearth has been honored. This is a mainstream and universally practiced custom in the ancient Greek world. Hestia always comes first. Her name was invoked at the beginning of every prayer, no matter which other god the prayer was ultimately for. She was the gateway to the divine. You had to go through her, through the stable, sacred center she represented, before you could presume to speak with the other, more volatile gods on Olympus. You watch the party unfold. They laugh, they argue, they make toasts to Zeus, the king, to Apollo, the patron of the arts, to Dionysus, the god of the wine that is now flowing freely. But as the night draws to a close, and the last of the wine is being poured, the host rises one final time. He raises his cup. To Hestia last, he says, and once again, a final offering is poured upon the hearth. This practice of beginning and ending with Hestia is a powerful piece of symbolic logic. It frames the entire event. Hestia is the sacred bookend, the alpha and the omega of the social gathering. She opens the door, and she closes it. Her presence ensures that the event, even a boisterous and wine-soaked party, is contained within a sacred, ordered space. This is where you find a quirky and debated detail. There is a famous, somewhat comical phrase attributed to the ancient Greeks. Hestia starts the song. But what does it actually mean on the surface? It is a simple reference to this custom of honoring her first, but some scholars argue it has a deeper, more proverbial meaning. Does it mean, let S start with the most important foundational business first? Or is it a way of saying, let S do things in the proper, established order, like many ancient idioms? Its exact nuance is a matter of some scholarly debate, a little puzzle of language that hints at just how deeply ingrained Hestia was in the Greek way of thinking. This custom of first and last was not limited to feasts. It applied to the most solemn and important act of public worship, animal sacrifice. At a grand public festival, when a bull was being sacrificed to Zeus, the very first portion of the animal, often a piece of the fat-wrapped thigh bone, would be burned on the altar in Hestia's name, and the very last prayers of the ceremony would be addressed to her. She was the divine master of ceremonies, the one who ensured that the sacred lines of communication between the mortal world and the world of the gods were open and functioning correctly. You look at the dying embers of the nobleman's hearth. The party is over. The guests have departed. The hall is quiet, but Hestia's presence remains. She was there at the beginning. She was there at the end, and her quiet, steady flame was the silent witness to everything that happened in between. She is not the star of the show. She is the stage itself. UV felt Hestia's presence in the humble hearth of the farmhouse and in the ornate hearth of the nobleman's hall. You understand her as the goddess of the private home, the sacred center of the family. But her domain, her quiet and persistent influence, does not stop at the front door. Now, you must follow her out of the private oikos and into the public life of the polis, the Greek city-state. Let your consciousness be drawn to the heart of a bustling, prosperous city, perhaps Athens itself. You are standing in the agora, the central marketplace and public square. It is a chaotic, noisy, and wonderfully vibrant place. Men are arguing about politics. Merchants are hawking their wares, and philosophers are gathering disciples in the shade of a colonnade. This is the heart of the city's commercial and social life, but it is not the city's true center. To find that, you must walk to a specific and very important building. It is not the most grand or beautiful structure. It is not the Parthenon, perched high on the Acropolis in its shining marble glory. It is a much more modest, functional building, often a simple, circular hall. This is the Prytanis. In Roman terms, it would be the Curia, or Senate House. This is the home of the city's government, the place where the chosen magistrates and council members meet to administer the affairs of the state. You step inside, and the noisy chaos of the agora is replaced by a solemn, civic quiet. And there, in the very center of this building, you see it. A hearth, a circular stone hearth, with a fire burning in its center. This is Hestia's public flame. Just as the private hearth was the sacred heart of the family, this public hearth was the sacred heart of the city. This is a mainstream historical fact, central to understanding the Greek concept of community. The city was seen as a single, large family, and this fire was its shared, ancestral hearth. The flame burning here was considered to be eternal, a living symbol of the city's own life force. It was never allowed to go out. You watch as a group of city officials gathers for a meeting before they begin their debate on a new law or a treaty with a neighboring city. They each give a slight, respectful nod to the fire. They are acknowledging that their work is being done in the presence of the goddess of civic unity and order. Her presence here is a constant silent reminder that they are not just squabbling politicians. They are the guardians of a single sacred community. This is where Hestia's role becomes deeply political. She is the goddess of the state. the divine embodiment of the city's identity. This hearth is not just a symbol, it is a source of power. Oaths sworn by this fire were considered the most solemn and unbreakable. Treaties were ratified in its presence. Foreign ambassadors were received here, in the warmth of the city's sacred heart, as a sign of peace and hospitality. This public role leads to a quirky and niche detail of her worship. The caretakers of this sacred fire. The fire in the Prytanis had to be tended 24 hours a day. This was a state duty of the highest importance. Who was responsible? The sources suggest that it was often the magistrates themselves, the very men who governed the city. It is a wonderful image, the most powerful men in the city taking turns to play the role of a simple hearth keeper. A domestic duty, elevated to the highest level of civic honor. It was a symbolic act, a reminder that their first duty was not to their own ambition, but to the care and maintenance of the city's collective life. This public hearth, however, also raises a complex and debated question for historians. Hestia is a profoundly female-centric goddess, her domain in the home being almost exclusively the world of women, but the Prytanis, the world of politics and law, was an exclusively male domain. How did the ancient Greeks reconcile this? Was the public worship of Hestia, led by men, a way for the male-dominated state to co-opt and control the powerful symbolism of the female-run household? Or was it a genuine acknowledgement that the values of the home, stability, nourishment, continuity, were the essential foundation for a successful state? The exact gender politics of Hestia as public cult are a subtle and fascinating area of ongoing scholarly discussion. You look at the flame, burning steadily in the center of the council hall. It is the same quiet, unassuming flame you saw in the farmhouse. But its meaning has expanded. It is no longer just the heart of a single family. It is the heart of a whole community, a whole city. It is the divine spark of civilization, the quiet fire that keeps the darkness of chaos and disunity at bay. Hestia is not just a domestic goddess. She is the silent, steady foundation of the political world. You are standing in the Prytanis, the heart of the city, the eternal flame of Hestia burning with a steady, reassuring light. It is the symbol of the city's life, its continuity, its very soul. But a Greek city was not a static, isolated entity. It was a living, growing thing, and when a city grew too large or when political pressures became too great, it would give birth. It would send out a portion of its citizens to found a new city, a colony, in a distant land. And this is where you will witness one of the most beautiful and potent rituals associated with Hestia. It is a ritual of transmission, of carrying a piece of home to a new and foreign shore. You watch as a group of men prepares for a long and dangerous journey. They are the chosen founders, the oikistes, of a new colony. They are gathering in the Prytanis for one final solemn ceremony before they depart. Their ships are waiting in the harbor, loaded with tools, seeds, and weapons. But the most important provision they will take with them is not packed in a wooden crate. The leader of the expedition, a man chosen for his courage and wisdom, approaches the public hearth. He does not speak. He kneels, and from a priest, he is given a special vessel. It is not a fancy golden chalice, but a sturdy, practical ceramic container with a perforated lid, something like a modern censer or a brazier, designed to carry hot coals safely. With great reverence, he uses a pair of bronze tongs to take a few glowing embers from the eternal flame of the city's hearth. He carefully places them inside the vessel. He closes the lid, and now he holds in his hands a living piece of his homeland. He is not just carrying fire, he is carrying Hestia herself. This is a mainstream and critically important part of Greek colonization. When a new city was founded, it was not considered a completely new and independent entity. It was a child of its mother city, its metropolis, and this sacred fire was the umbilical cord, the very first act upon reaching the new, foreign land, even before the first walls were built, would be to establish a new public hearth and to kindle it with the flame from the old city. You follow the colonists as they march in a solemn procession from the Prytanis down to the harbor. The man carrying the sacred fire is guarded as if he were carrying the city's greatest treasure, which, in a very real sense, he is. The fire is a guarantee of legitimacy. It is the proof that this new city is a true Greek polis, a continuation of the old, not some wildcat settlement of outcasts. It is a symbol of political and religious continuity. The journey by sea is long and perilous. The man tasked with keeping the coals alive has the most stressful job of all. He must feed the embers with small amounts of fuel, never letting them die out, but also never letting them burst into a dangerous flame that could threaten the wooden ship. This practice leads to a quirky and niche question. What happened if the fire went out? Imagine the scene. A storm at sea. A rogue wave washing over the deck, extinguishing the precious flame. Was the whole colonial enterprise doomed? Would they have to turn back? The historical sources are silent on this specific, practical disaster. But it is likely that such an event would have been seen as a terrible omen, a sign that the gods, and Hestia in particular, did not favor this new venture. It is a testament to the skill and dedication of these firekeepers that so many colonies were successfully founded. The ship finally reaches its destination, a sheltered bay on a wild, unknown coastline. The colonists disembark, their feet touching the new land, and they perform their first sacred act. They clear a space, they build a simple, temporary altar, a makeshift hearth, and with the glowing embers they have so carefully guarded, they kindle a new fire. The smoke from this fire rising into the foreign sky is a declaration. It says, "We are here. This is now our home. This is now a Greek city. Hestia is with us." This is a beautiful and elegant concept, but it is also a powerful tool of colonization. This is a topic that modern historians, looking at the past through a post-colonial lens, have debated. Was this ritual a peaceful act of bringing civilization to a new land, as the Greeks saw it? Or was it an act of profound cultural arrogance, a way of imposing a Greek identity on a landscape that was already home to other people? The flame of Hestia, so gentle and domestic in the Prytanis, becomes, in this context, a powerful and ambiguous symbol of imperial expansion. You watch the new flame grow, its light pushing back the shadows of the unfamiliar wilderness. From one fire, 1,000 fires can be lit. Hestia is not a goddess who is diminished by being shared. Her power multiplies. She is the quiet, steady, and infinitely portable heart of the Greek world. The fire of the new colony burns brightly, a small, defiant spark of Greek civilization on a foreign shore. You have seen how Hestia's flame is the anchor of the family, the city, and the expanding Greek world. But her hearth is not just a symbol of community and continuity. It is also a place of profound and absolute sanctuary. It is a divine shield, a place where the normal, brutal rules of the world are suspended. Let your consciousness drift away from the new colony and find itself in the hall of a powerful king. The king is holding court, listening to petitions and dispensing justice with a stern and unwavering hand. A man is brought before him, a stranger, his clothes ragged, his face etched with fear and exhaustion. He is a fugitive, an exile from another city, a man who has committed a terrible crime. Perhaps he has killed another man in a fit of rage and has been pursued across the land. The king's guards stand ready, their spears gleaming. The law is clear. The man is an outcast, a polluted individual who has no rights. The king's duty is to cast him out, or perhaps even to execute him, to cleanse his city of the man's tainted presence. Justice is about to be swift and harsh. But the fugitive knows one last, desperate gambit. He knows the unwritten law that is older and more powerful than any king's decree. With a sudden burst of energy, he breaks free from the guards. He does not run for the door. He runs towards the great hearth that burns in the center of the hall. He reaches the hearth, and he falls to his knees. He scoops up a handful of the warm gray ash from the edge of the fire and sprinkles it on his head, a gesture of ultimate submission. And then he touches the stone edge of the hearth itself. The entire room freezes. The guards halt in their tracks. The king's face, a moment before a mask of stern justice, is now a complex mixture of surprise, frustration, and a deep, grudging respect. The fugitive has just played his final card. He has claimed the sanctuary of Hestia. This is a mainstream and incredibly powerful concept in the ancient Greek world, the sanctity of the hearth. By touching the hearth, the fugitive, known as a suppliant, has placed himself under the direct protection of the goddess. He is no longer just a criminal in the king's hall. He is Hestia's guest. To harm him now, to drag him away from the hearth, would not just be an act of injustice, it would be an act of profound sacrilege, a direct insult to the goddess of the home, an act that would bring down a terrible divine curse, a miasma, upon the king and his entire city. The king is now in a terrible bind. His duty as a ruler demands he punish the criminal, but his duty as a pious man demands he respect the sanctity of the suppliant. Hestia's law has just trumped the king's law. This is the ultimate power of the goddess. She is the final court of appeals, the last hope for the hopeless. This practice, however, leads to a quirky and fascinating question that historians and classicists love to debate. What were the exact rules of this sanctuary? How long did the protection last? Could a man just cling to a hearth indefinitely, creating a kind of permanent diplomatic standoff? The myths and histories are filled with these dramatic scenes of supplication, but they are often vague on the legal and practical details. Was there a time limit? Was the host obligated to not only protect the suppliant, but also to feed and house him? And what if the suppliant's crime was so heinous that it polluted the hearth itself? The precise legal and religious mechanics of this hearth clinging are a wonderful gray area of ancient custom. In the king's hall, the tense silence is broken. The king makes a decision, the only one he can. Give him bread, he says to his servants, his voice tight. Give him wine. Let him wash. We will hear his story in the morning. He has accepted the suppliant. He has chosen piety over justice. For now, this does not mean the fugitive will go unpunished. The king will now have to find a way to resolve the situation, perhaps by purifying the man through a ritual, or by helping him to negotiate a settlement with the family of his victim. But the immediate threat of violence is gone. The hearth has done its work. You look at the fugitive, now being given a cup of wine by a nervous servant, his body still trembling, but his eyes filled with a flicker of hope. And you look at the steady, impassive flame in the hearth. Hestia has no armies. She has no lightning bolts. She has no grand temples filled with priests. But her power, in this moment, is more absolute than that of any king or any warrior. She is the goddess of mercy, the silent, unmoving guardian of the sacred and universal law of sanctuary. You have witnessed the quiet, pervasive power of Hestia in every facet of Greek life, from the humble farmhouse to the king's court, from the political council to the wild shores of a new colony. Her presence is a constant foundational hum beneath the noise of both mortal and divine life. And yet, a strange paradox begins to emerge. If she is so important, so central, where are her stories? You return in your mind to the feasting hall of Olympus. Zeus is still telling his stories of romantic conquest. Apollo is composing a new song about one of his heroic adventures, and Ares is boasting about his prowess in a recent war. The entire fabric of Greek mythology is woven from these stories, these grand, dramatic, and often morally ambiguous narratives. Every god and goddess has a rich and complex portfolio of personal myths. Think of Hera, Hestia's sister. Her stories are a catalog of jealous rages, of vengeful plots against her husband's many lovers and illegitimate children. Think of Demeter, her other sister. Her story is the epic tale of her frantic, world-altering search for her lost daughter, Persephone, a myth that explains the very changing of the seasons. Think of her brother, Poseidon. His myths are full of sea monsters, earthquakes, and bitter rivalries with other gods. Even Hades, the lord of the underworld, has the dramatic and controversial story of his abduction of Persephone. But what about Hestia? You search the mythological archives, and you find almost nothing. This is the great, central, and defining mystery of the goddess. Hestia is a major Olympian, one of the original six, with a status and honor that is unimpeachable. And yet, she has virtually no personal mythology. She is a goddess with almost no plot. She doesn't get into arguments. She doesn't have love affairs. She doesn't fight in wars. She doesn't trick mortals. She doesn't punish heroes. She simply is. This is a mainstream and well-known fact to any student of Greek mythology. Hestia is famously, almost stubbornly, static. She is a character who refuses to participate in the drama that swirls around her. This lack of a personal narrative has led to a fascinating and ongoing debate among scholars. Why is she so storyless? One school of thought argues that it is because her very nature is anti-narrative. Stories are driven by change, by conflict, by movement, by desire. Hestia represents the exact opposite. She is the goddess of the fixed center, of stability, of permanence. To give her a dramatic, adventurous story would be to violate her essential character. Her story is the absence of story. Her drama is the refusal of drama. This is where you can find a truly quirky and niche detail. The ancient Greeks had a literary term, a kind of storyteller's inside joke, that perfectly captures this. When a long, epic poem or a play was starting, the poet would invoke the muses, asking for inspiration. They would often say, "We begin with the muses." But the unspoken traditional understanding was that all prayers and all beginnings started with Hestia. So there was a saying, "To begin with Hestia," which came to mean something like, to do things properly, to start at the very beginning. This implies her presence is so foundational, so assumed, that it doesn't even need to be a part of the exciting, forward-moving part of the story. She is the once upon a time before the real action starts. Another school of thought, however, argues that perhaps Hestia did have a richer body of myths at one point, but that they have been lost to us. This is a common problem for classicists. The body of ancient Greek literature that has survived to the present day is a tiny, almost accidental fraction of what once existed. Is it possible that there were local cults of Hestia that had their own rich traditions and stories, but that these were never written down by the major poets whose works happened to survive? The debate is a classic absence of evidence is not evidence of absence problem. We can only know what the surviving texts tell us, and they tell us very little. You look at Hestia, standing by her hearth, a calm island in a sea of divine melodrama. Her siblings and nephews and nieces are like actors on a grand stage, their lives a series of thrilling and tragic acts. Hestia, in this analogy, is not one of the actors. She is the stage itself. She is the theater. She is the quiet, unchanging foundation that allows all the other stories to be told. Her lack of personal myths, which at first seems like a weakness, a sign of her being boring or unimportant, now reveals itself to be her greatest strength. Because she is not tied to a specific story, a specific conflict, or a specific personality flaw, she can be universal. She is pure concept, pure principle. She is the quiet, unwavering embodiment of home, of sanctuary, of the sacred center. And that is a story more profound and more enduring than any of the noisy, temporary tales of her much more famous relatives. You're beginning to understand the beautiful paradox of Hestia. Her lack of story is her story. Her power lies in her stillness, in her quiet refusal to be drawn into the chaotic narratives of her family. This static quality is not just a feature of her personality, it is the very essence of her divine function, and it is reflected in her physical relationship with the world. You watch the gods in the great hall of Olympus. They are a restless bunch. Zeus is constantly descending to earth, usually in some ridiculous disguise, to pursue a mortal woman. Apollo zips back and forth between Olympus and his great sanctuary at Delphi. Hermes, the messenger god, is a perpetual blur of motion, his winged sandals carrying him to the furthest corners of the cosmos. Even Hera, for all her association with the stability of marriage, is frequently leaving Olympus to meddle in the affairs of heroes like Heracles, or to punish one of Zeus's unfortunate conquests. The gods of the Greek pantheon are, as a mainstream historical fact, defined by their interactions with the mortal world. Their stories are generated by their journeys, their interventions, their constant crossing of the boundary between the divine and the human. But Hestia never leaves. She never ever leaves Olympus. She is the only one of the original Olympians who does not have stories that take her on adventures in the world of mortals. She is, by her very nature, a goddess who stays put. Her divine duty is to tend the hearth of the gods, and that is a job that can only be done in one place. You can imagine her siblings getting ready for a trip. Just popping down to Phrygia, Zeus might say, adjusting his eagle costume. "Don't wait up," and Hestia would just give a calm nod, her hands never ceasing their gentle rhythmic tending of the central fire. She is the divine homebody, the one who is always there when everyone else gets back from their dramatic, world-altering adventures. This is not just a piece of mythological trivia, it is a profound statement about what she represents. Hestia is the goddess of the fixed center. She is the center. The very idea of her going on a quest or a journey is a contradiction in terms. The center, by definition, is the point that does not move. It is the stable axis around which everything else revolves. This leads to a quirky and niche detail that highlights her static nature. In the rich tradition of Greek art on vases, in sculptures, in frescoes, Hestia is notoriously difficult to identify. While Zeus is always depicted with his thunderbolt, Poseidon with his trident, and Athena with her helmet and spear, Hestia has no iconic attributes, no weapons, no animal companions. She is usually just depicted as a modest, veiled woman, sometimes holding a simple staff. She is defined not by the objects she carries, but by her context. If you see a quiet, veiled goddess standing next to a hearth, it is probably Hestia. If she is anywhere else, it is probably not. She is so completely identified with her place that she is almost invisible when removed from it. This absolute rootedness, this refusal to travel, is the source of a subtle and interesting scholarly debate. Some have interpreted Hestia's immobility as a sign of her passivity, of her lack of agency compared to the other gods. They see her as a minor, domestic figure confined to the home, while the other, more important gods get to go out and interact with the wider world. But another, more compelling interpretation sees her stillness not as a weakness, but as the ultimate source of her power. The other gods can roam because they know the center will hold. Hestia's constant, unwavering presence is the anchor that allows for all their dynamic movement. She is the source of the stability that they, in their chaotic adventures, so often take for granted. She is not confined to the home, she is the home. Her power is not active and interventionist. It is foundational and gravitational. She holds the entire divine family, and by extension the entire cosmos, in a steady, stable orbit around her quiet, eternal flame. You watch her for a long time. This goddess who never wanders. Her stillness is not emptiness. It is a deep, resonant, and powerful presence. She is the silence that makes the music possible. She is the fixed point in a spinning world, the calm at the eye of the Olympian storm. Her greatest adventure is the constant, unending, and profoundly important journey of staying right where she is. You are deep in contemplation of Hestia's quiet, foundational power, her profound stillness at the center of the chaotic Olympian family. You understand that she is the anchor, the fixed point, and it is at this moment that you recall one of the most famous and most puzzling stories about her. If you can even call it a story. It is more of a footnote, a single, quiet event that speaks volumes. It is the story of how she gave up her seat. As you look around the great hall, you see the 12 golden thrones of the Olympians, arranged in a semicircle around Hestia's central hearth. These thrones are the ultimate symbols of power and prestige. To have a seat here is to be one of the divine ruling council, one of the major shareholders in the corporation of the cosmos. The lineup, as you've noted, can be a little fluid, but the number is always 12. 12 is a sacred perfect number, but a new god arrives on the scene. He is a latecomer, a disruptive, chaotic, and wildly popular new force. It is Dionysus, the god of wine, of ecstasy, of theater, of the wild, untamed aspects of nature. He is the son of Zeus and a mortal woman, Semele, and he had to fight his way into the pantheon. His divinity only grudgingly accepted by the established order, especially by a deeply suspicious Hera Dionysus. With his wild entourage of satyrs and maenads, his loud music, his intoxicating influence, is the absolute antithesis of Hestia. She is order, he is chaos. She is the quiet interior, he is the wild exterior. She is sobriety, he is intoxication. And yet, a space must be made for him. His power and his popularity among mortals and gods alike cannot be denied. But there are only 12 thrones. To include Dionysus, one of the existing members must step down. The stage is set for a classic Olympian power struggle. Who will be forced out? Will it be Ares, the unpopular bully Hephaestus, the lame craftsman? The divine family braces for another shouting match, another round of celestial politics. And then, Hestia does something completely unexpected. She quietly stands up, without any fuss, without any argument, without any demand for recognition. She voluntarily gives her throne to the young newcomer. She relinquishes her seat on the divine council and returns to her preferred place, her true place of power, by the hearth. This is the mainstream and most commonly cited version of the myth, a story that perfectly encapsulates Hestia's character. She is the one who steps aside to avoid a conflict. She is the one who chooses peace and family harmony over personal prestige and a fancy golden chair. This single quiet act has been the subject of immense scholarly interpretation and debate for centuries. What does it really mean? One interpretation is that it is a beautiful allegorical story about the nature of true power. Hestia realizes that a throne is just a symbol, and that her real power doesn't come from a seat on the council. It comes from her position at the center of the home. By giving up the symbol, she reinforces the importance of the reality. She demonstrates that true honor is not about titles or positions, but about fulfilling one's essential function. But there is another, more complex and niche interpretation. This story may reflect a real historical shift in Greek religion. In the earliest Mycenaean and archaic periods, the hearth cult and the goddess of the home were likely of paramount, central importance. But as Greek society evolved, as the wild, ecstatic cult of Dionysus swept in from the east and gained immense popularity, the religious landscape changed. The quiet domestic goddess had to make way for the loud, exciting, and more publicly dramatic new god. The story of Hestia giving up her seat in this view is not a story about a goddess's personality. It is a myth that explains and justifies a real-world change in religious practice. It is a piece of theological diplomacy. This is a classic chicken and egg problem for historians of religion. Did the myth come first, reflecting the inherent character of the gods? Or did the changes in worship come first, and the myth was then created to explain them? It is a debate that is impossible to definitively resolve. You look at Hestia, her back to the now occupied throne, her attention focused entirely on the steady, eternal flame. Does she look diminished? Has she lost power? No. In fact, her status seems to have been enhanced. Her quiet act of abdication is a demonstration of a kind of strength that none of the other squabbling, ego-driven gods can comprehend. She has shown that she is above their petty games. She has given up her vote on the council, but she has maintained her position as the soul of the home. The other 11 or 12, depending on who is counting, can continue to argue and scheme from their golden thrones. But when the meeting is over, when the feasting begins, they will all still gather around her fire. And the very first and the very last offering will still be hers. She has proven that you don't need a seat at the table when you are the table itself. You are standing in the great hall of Olympus, a silent witness to Hestia's profound act of quiet abdication. She has given her throne to Dionysus, trading the symbol of power for the substance of her essential role. This single event brings the very nature of her divinity into sharp, clear focus. It allows you to draw a fundamental distinction between two different kinds of power that operate on Olympus: the quiet, foundational power of Hestia and the loud, dramatic, interventionist power of her relatives. Look at Zeus. His power is active, kinetic, and often explosive. It manifests as a lightning bolt, a sudden dramatic intervention in the affairs of mortals and gods. His power is about command, about bending the world to his will, about making things happen. He is the CEO, the one who makes the executive decisions, often with a loud and terrifying bang. Look at Hera. Her power is also active, but it is the power of the political operator. It is the power of alliances, of jealousy, of vengeance. She schemes, she plots, she interferes, she works to protect her own status and the sanctity of her marriage, and she does so by directly manipulating the lives of others, often with disastrous consequences for the unfortunate mortals who get caught in her path. She is the queen, and her power is about maintaining the social and political order through constant, vigilant action. Look at Ares or Athena. Their power is the power of conflict, of the battlefield. It is direct, confrontational, and aimed at achieving a specific outcome: victory. They are gods of strategy and of brute force, and their power is measured in defeated enemies and conquered cities. This is the dominant mode of divinity on Olympus. It is a power that is defined by its effects, by its visibility, by its narrative. It is the power of the verb, of the action. Now, look at Hestia. Her power is not a verb, it is a noun. It is the power of being, not doing. Her power does not manifest as a sudden event. It manifests as a constant state. She does not intervene, she presides. She does not command, she is. This is a mainstream and crucial distinction in understanding the Greek pantheon. Hestia represents a more ancient, more foundational type of divinity. She is less a personality and more a principle. She is the divine equivalent of a physical law, like gravity. Gravity doesn't do anything in a dramatic, narrative sense. It doesn't have good days and bad days. It is simply the constant, invisible force that holds everything together, that allows for the possibility of any action at all. That is Hestia. This comparison brings up a quirky and niche philosophical idea. Some ancient Greek philosophers, particularly those of the Pythagorean school, were obsessed with the number 10. They believed it was the perfect number, the basis of all reality. They developed a model of the cosmos that included 10 heavenly bodies. The problem was, they could only observe 9, the sun, the moon, the earth, and the 6 known planets. So, what did they do? They invented a 10th planet, a counter-Earth called Antichthon, which was always on the opposite side of the sun, and therefore conveniently invisible. Why is this relevant? Because in their list of the 10 great cosmic principles, they placed Hestia at the absolute center, as the central fire around which all the heavenly bodies, including the earth, revolved. For these philosophers, Hestia wasn't just the goddess of the domestic hearth, she was the literal gravitational center of the entire universe. This philosophical view, while not mainstream religious belief, perfectly captures the nature of her power. She is the stable center that allows for motion. She is the quiet that allows for sound. She is the order that allows for the chaotic stories of her family to unfold without tearing the cosmos apart. This distinction between the quiet foundational gods and the loud, active gods is a topic of ongoing discussion among scholars of comparative religion. Many ancient pantheons have this kind of division. You often find a remote, stable creator god who sets the universe in motion and then recedes into the background, while a younger, more active generation of weather gods and warrior gods take over the day-to-day business of interacting with humanity. Hestia, in a way, is a beautiful fusion of both. She is a part of that older foundational layer, a being of pure principle, but she remains physically and ritually present at the very heart of the active younger generation. She is the quiet memory of the universe's origin, sitting right in the middle of its noisy, ongoing story. So you see, her power and the power of Zeus are not in competition. They are complementary. He is the king, but she is the kingdom. He is the actor on the stage, but she is the stage itself, the silent, unmoving, and absolutely essential foundation upon which all the divine drama is built. You have come to understand Hestia in her purely Greek context, as the quiet, stable center of the chaotic Olympian family. But the influence of the Greek gods did not stop at the shores of the Aegean. Their stories, their personalities, and their divine functions were so powerful that they were adopted and adapted by another rising civilization, a civilization that would take Greek culture and spread it to the ends of the known world. We must now leave the golden peak of Olympus and travel to the 7 hills of Rome. As your consciousness shifts, the landscape changes. The sun-bleached marble and the rugged, mountainous terrain of Greece give way to the brick, travertine, and bustling, crowded streets of a city that is becoming the master of the world. The language changes from the melodic, poetic sounds of Greek to the more solid, declarative, and legislative sounds of Latin. You have arrived in Rome, and here Hestia is known by another name, Vesta. You make your way through the heart of the city, through the noisy, chaotic, and magnificent Roman Forum. This is the center of Roman public life, a vast, sprawling complex of temples, law courts, and senate houses. And here, in a place of honor near the original heart of the Forum, you find her temple. But it is not a temple in the grand, rectangular style of the Parthenon. It is a small, intimate, circular building designed to evoke the shape of an ancient, rustic hut. This is the Temple of Vesta, and inside there is no grand human-like statue of the goddess. There is only one thing, a fire, the sacred, eternal flame of the Roman state, the Ignis Vestae. This is a mainstream and central feature of Roman state religion. Vesta, like Hestia, was the goddess of the hearth, the home, and the family. But in Rome, her public role, her function as the guardian of the city's life force, was even more formalized, more powerful, and more central to the identity of the state than it was in Greece. And this is where you encounter the most significant difference between the two goddesses. Hestia, on Olympus, was a solitary figure. Vesta, in Rome, was not. Her sacred fire was not tended by the goddess herself or by the city's male magistrates. It was tended by one of the most powerful and respected religious institutions in the Roman world, the Vestal Virgins. You watch as one of these women emerges from the temple. She is dressed in the ancient, layered style of a Roman priestess, her head veiled. Her white robes a symbol of her purity. She is one of the 6 Vestals, women who were chosen in childhood from the city's most noble families to serve the goddess for a term of 30 years. Their duty was one, and one only, to ensure that the sacred fire of Rome never ever went out. If the fire were to be extinguished, it would be the most terrible of all possible omens, a sign that the goddess had withdrawn her protection, a harbinger of the city's imminent doom. Because their duty was so important, the Vestals were granted extraordinary honors and privileges, a quirky and fascinating niche in the deeply patriarchal Roman society. They were the only full-time female priesthood in Rome. They were freed from their father's legal control, the patria potestas, and could own property and write their own wills. They had special, honored seats at the public games. An oath sworn by a Vestal was considered unbreakable. If a condemned criminal on his way to execution happened to encounter a Vestal virgin, he was automatically pardoned. They possessed a sacred, inviolable power, but this power came at a terrible price. Like Hestia, the Vestals were required to remain virgins. Their chastity was directly linked to the health and security of the Roman state. A Vestal who broke her vow of celibacy was considered to have committed an act of high treason, a pollution of the city's sacred heart. And the punishment was horrific. She would be taken to a special underground chamber, given a small amount of food and water, and buried alive. Her lover would be publicly flogged to death in the Forum. This stark, brutal reality raises a difficult and debated question for historians. Were the Vestals revered and honored figures, powerful women operating at the very heart of the state? Or were they, in a sense, sacred prisoners, their bodies and their lives placed under a terrible and unforgiving form of state control? The truth, as always, is likely a complex and uncomfortable mixture of both. They were symbols of female power, but that power was entirely conditional on their absolute submission to the state's rules. You look from the dedicated, disciplined priestess back to the small, circular temple, Hestia and Vesta. They are two sides of the same coin, but the coin has been minted in a different place. Hestia is a principle, a quiet, philosophical concept. Vesta is an institution, a powerful, formalized, and demanding arm of the state. Hestia is a goddess who steps aside to avoid conflict. Vesta is a goddess whose honor is defended by the most brutal of public punishments. In Rome, the quiet goddess of the home has put on the stern, unyielding mask of empire. You are standing in the Roman Forum, the imposing institutional weight of the Temple of Vesta and her powerful priestesses, a stark contrast to the gentle, almost philosophical presence of Hestia on Olympus. You have seen her power manifest in the private hearth and the public hearth in both Greece and Rome. And yet, as you survey the grand architectural landscape of the ancient world, a final nagging paradox emerges. In the Greek city, you saw the grand temple to Athena, the Parthenon, dominating the Acropolis. You saw the massive, sprawling temple complex dedicated to Zeus at Olympia. In Rome, you can see the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill, its gilded roof shining in the sun. Every other major god and goddess seems to have a portfolio of grand monumental temples, places built to inspire awe and to host large public festivals. But what about Hestia? You search your memory of the Greek world. You saw her eternal flame in the Prytanis, the city council hall. But that was a civic building, not a dedicated temple. You felt her presence in every home, but that was a domestic space. Where are the great, soaring marble temples built in her name alone? The answer is, there are almost none. This is a mainstream and deeply puzzling fact for students of Greek architecture and religion. Despite her supreme importance, despite being honored first and last in every sacrifice, Hestia is one of the most architecturally underrepresented of all the major gods. With a few rare and often debated exceptions, there are no ruins of a temple of Hestia to rival those of her siblings. So, why? Why does the most foundational goddess lack the grandest of buildings? One theory, the most simple and practical one, goes back to the very nature of her worship. The argument is that Hestia didn't need separate, grand temples because, in a very real sense, every Prytanis in every Greek city was her temple. Her public cult was so deeply integrated into the machinery of government that it didn't require its own, separate building. Her sacred space was the heart of the city's political life, a far more powerful and central location than a standalone temple on the edge of town might have been. But another, more philosophical interpretation gets closer to the heart of her divine nature. A temple, a naos, is a house for a god. It is a place where the divine being is thought to reside, and where mortals can go to visit them. But Hestia is the goddess of the home itself. She is the concept of the sacred dwelling. To build a house for the goddess of house is a kind of conceptual redundancy, a philosophical tautology. She is the one who makes a space a home. She cannot be contained within a home herself. This is where you stumble upon a quirky and beautiful niche idea. The very shape of her hearth, and of her few dedicated shrines, like the Temple of Vesta in Rome, is circular. This is highly unusual in Greek and Roman sacred architecture, which is almost entirely dominated by the rectangle. Why the circle? The circle has no beginning and no end. It is a symbol of eternity, of unity, of focus. But more importantly, the circle is the geometric shape that defines a center. A rectangle has 4 corners, but a circle has one perfect center. Her shrines are not meant to be grand, impressive structures to be viewed from the outside. They are designed to draw you inwards, to focus your attention on the single, vital point in the middle, the fire. Her architecture, like her power, is not about outward display. It is about the integrity of the center. This paradox, of the most important goddess having the fewest temples, has been a source of ongoing debate for historians. Some have argued that it is, once again, evidence that she was a lesser goddess, that her cult simply didn't have the wealth or the political clout to command the construction of major public works. Others argue the exact opposite, that her lack of temples is the ultimate proof of her supreme importance. She is so omnipresent, so universally embedded in the fabric of both private and public life, that to confine her to a single building would be to diminish her, to limit her. You are standing in the middle of a bustling Greek city. You are surrounded by temples. Over there is the grand house of Apollo. Up on the hill is the magnificent house of Athena. But where is Hestia's house? You realize in a flash of understanding that you are standing in it. The entire city is her temple. Every home that contains a hearth is a small private chapel dedicated to her. The Prytanes is her grand public altar. She does not need a single monumental temple because her presence is the invisible, sacred mortar that holds all the other buildings and the entire community together. She is not a goddess you visit. She is the goddess you are already with. You are at the end of your long, quiet journey of understanding. You have traveled from the chaotic halls of Olympus to the humble hearths of Greek farmhouses, from the solemn council chambers of the polis to the wild shores of new colonies. You have seen Hestia in her Roman guise as the stern and powerful Vesta, and you have puzzled over her strange lack of grand temples and personal myths. You have gathered all the pieces of this divine enigma. Now, it is time to put them together. You return, one last time, to the great Megaron on Mount Olympus. The scene is just as you first found it, a swirling, chaotic, and brilliant storm of divine personalities. Zeus is still holding court, Hera is still watching with her sharp, appraising eyes, and Apollo is still making his lyre sing. The great, noisy, glorious drama of the gods continues, as it always will. But something is different. You are different. You no longer see the scene as just a chaotic jumble. You can now perceive its underlying structure, the invisible architecture that holds it all together, and at the very center of that structure, you see her, Hestia, the quiet goddess, standing by her hearth, her attention focused on the single, steady, eternal flame. You finally understand. Hestia's quietness, her low profile, her lack of a dramatic narrative, is not a sign of her being unimportant. It is the ultimate sign of her profound, unshakable, and absolutely foundational importance. She is the goddess of the background. She is the divine stage upon which all the other, more exciting stories are allowed to unfold. Think of it like this. You are listening to a beautiful piece of music. Your ear is drawn to the soaring melody of the flute, to the dramatic thunder of the drums, but without the quiet, constant, foundational note of the cello in the background. Providing the harmonic center, the melody would be meaningless noise, the drumming just a chaotic racket. Hestia is that cello note. She is the harmonic center of the Olympian orchestra. You have learned that she is the goddess of the home, the oikos, but she is more than that. She is the goddess of the very concept of center. This is a mainstream and accepted understanding of her role. She is the center of the family. She is the center of the city. In the minds of some philosophers, she was even the center of the entire cosmos. This is why she does not move. The center, by definition, is the part that must remain still, so that everything else can have a stable point of reference. This is why she has no personal story. The foundation does not need a narrative. Its job is to support the narratives of others. This is why she has no grand temples. The context does not need to be contained. Its job is to contain everything else. Her power is not the power of a king or a warrior or a politician. It is the power of a constant. It is the power of the ground beneath your feet. You do not notice it. You do not write epic poems about it. You do not build grand monuments to it. But without it, you cannot stand. Without it, nothing else is possible. This brings you to one last beautifully niche and debated piece of her identity. What, exactly, is her flame? Is it a literal fire, or is it something more abstract? Some scholars have argued that Hestia represents not just the fire on the hearth, but the very idea of the ritual act itself. The proper performance of ritual is what creates order, what separates the civilized world from the wild, chaotic wilderness. Hestia, in this view, is the goddess of the established order, of the proper way of doing things. Her flame is the spark of civilization itself. You look at her one last time, this quiet, veiled goddess who gave up her throne to avoid an argument, who never leaves her post, who asks for nothing but receives the first and last of everything. You understand that she is the invisible infrastructure of the Greek world. She is its stability, its continuity, its very sanity. Her siblings and their children can have their adventures, their love affairs, their wars. They can be the thunder and the lightning, the waves and the wind. Hestia is content to be the hearth, the quiet, steady, and eternal flame at the center of it all. And you now know, with a deep and certain peace, that this does not make her the least of the Olympians. It makes her the greatest. And now the golden light of Olympus begins to soften and fade. The booming voices of the gods recede, becoming a gentle, distant murmur. The story is over. The quiet goddess of the hearth has found her place, not just in the pantheon, but in your understanding. Her steady, calming presence has done its work. Feel the world of myth gently dissolve, leaving behind not the drama of the gods, but the profound and simple peace of the goddess of the home. You are no longer in a grand celestial hall. You are back in your own quiet space, your own personal sanctuary. Think of the steady, rhythmic beat of your own heart. It is a quiet, constant flame you carry within you. It is the center of your own being, the source of your own warmth and life. Let that quiet, steady rhythm be your guide. Now, as you drift away from the world of stories and into the deep, silent world of sleep, there are no more arguments to be settled, no more sacrifices to be made. There is only the simple, foundational peace of the hearth, welcoming you home to rest. The story is complete. Good night. You stand there, a silent observer in this grand celestial hall, your gaze drawn to the quiet, steady presence of Hestia by the hearth. There's a profound sense of peace and stability about her, a stark contrast to the volatile, larger-than-life personalities clashing around her. To understand her, to grasp the source of her quiet power, you have to look back to a time before the golden thrones, before the feasting and the music, back to a very dark and frankly dysfunctional beginning. Hestia is the firstborn. This is not a minor detail. It is the absolute core of her identity. She is the eldest daughter of the Titans Kronos and Rhea, and her father, Kronos, had a serious problem. He had been given a prophecy that one of his own children would overthrow him, just as he had overthrown his own father, Uranus. His solution to this problem was not subtle. It was a horrifying act of celestial parenting. As each of his children was born, he took the infant and swallowed it whole. Imagine that. You are a newborn goddess, a being of pure, divine energy. The first experience you have of the world of your own father is being consumed, swallowed into the dark, chaotic belly of a titan. This is a foundational and frankly gruesome piece of Greek mythology, a story that sets the stage for the entire Olympian saga. Hestia was the first. She was the first to be born, and the first to be swallowed. After her came Demeter, then Hera, then Hades, then Poseidon. They all met the same fate. They were trapped, undigested but powerless, in their father's divine gut, a strange, dark prison where time had no meaning. It was only the last-born, Zeus, who escaped. His mother, Rhea, finally fed up with her husband's monstrous behavior, hid the infant Zeus away, and tricked Kronos into swallowing a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes instead. It's a classic bait-and-switch, a folktale motif that speaks to the triumph of cleverness over brute force. Zeus grew up in secret, and when he was strong enough, he returned to confront his father. He tricked Kronos into drinking a special potion which caused him to regurgitate his imprisoned children. And now, here is the quirky and fascinating detail that defines Hestia's unique status. The order of their rebirth was the reverse of their birth. So, the last one swallowed, Poseidon, was the first one out. then Hades, Hera, Demeter, and finally Hestia. The firstborn became the lastborn. This makes her both the eldest and the youngest of the original 6 Olympians. She has the seniority of the firstborn, the highest rank by right of birth, but she also has the purity and newness of the last to be reborn into the light. This dual identity, this paradox, is the key to her character. She is the beginning and the end, the alpha and the omega of her generation. This bizarre family history, this cycle of consumption and regurgitation, has led to a great deal of debate and interpretation among scholars, both ancient and modern. Some see it as a purely allegorical tale, a mythological representation of how a new world order, the Olympians, violently replaced an old one. The Titans, others have looked for psychological meaning, seeing it as a story about generational conflict and the fear of being consumed by the past. Was this story meant to be taken literally by the ancient Greeks, or was it always understood as a powerful metaphor? This is a question that lies at the heart of how we interpret mythology itself. You look at Hestia now, her calm demeanor by the fire taking on a new and profound depth. She has been through a trauma that is almost unimaginable. She has known a darkness and a confinement that her younger, but older brother Zeus never has. And yet, she shows no sign of it. There is no bitterness, no rage, while her siblings are engaged in a constant, noisy struggle for power and prestige. She seems to have transcended it. Perhaps her time in the darkness taught her something the others never learned. Her unique status as the first and the last gave her a special kind of honor. It was a form of respect that was hers by right, something she never had to fight for. Zeus, the boisterous king, owes his very existence to her and his other siblings. They were the ones who had to be swallowed for him to be saved. He may be the king of the gods, but Hestia is the elder stateswoman of the divine family, and her quiet dignity seems to spring from this unshakable foundational truth. Her power isn't about what she does, it is about who she is. You're beginning to understand the foundation of Hestia's quiet authority. Her status as the firstborn and last reborn gives her an innate honor that she doesn't need to advertise. But now, as you watch the chaotic divine soap opera unfold in the Great Hall, another question arises. Hestia is a goddess of profound beauty, a serene and gentle presence. In a world driven by alliances, by power marriages, and by the dramatic, often disastrous, love affairs of the gods, why is she alone? The answer to that question is not a matter of chance. It is a matter of a deliberate, definitive choice. A choice made in a moment of high drama that is one of the very few stories where Hestia takes center stage. As the new Olympian order was settling in after the great war with the Titans was won, the business of divine life began. And a key part of that business was marriage. Two of the most powerful and, frankly, most persistent of the male gods set their sights on Hestia. The first was Apollo, her own nephew. He is the god of music, of poetry, of prophecy, of reason. He is, in many ways, the golden boy of the Olympians. He is radiant, talented, and possessed of a celestial confidence that borders on arrogance. He approached Hestia, offering her a marriage that would have been a union of beauty and art, a partnership of serene order and brilliant creativity. The second suitor was her brother Poseidon, the lord of the seas. He is Apollo's opposite in every way. He is a god of raw, untamed elemental power. He is moody, tempestuous, his emotions as unpredictable as the oceans he rules. His proposal was not one of gentle poetry, but of overwhelming force, a union of the stable earth and the chaotic sea. You can imagine the scene, the two gods, light and darkness, reason and passion, both vying for her hand. The rest of the Olympian court watches, expecting a dramatic choice, a divine love triangle that will fuel gossip for centuries. A marriage to either would have created a powerful new alliance, shifting the balance of power on Olympus. This is a mainstream and well-documented myth, appearing in the Homeric hymns. The pressure on Hestia must have been immense. She was not just being courted, she was being treated as a strategic asset, a piece in the great game of divine politics. But Hestia did not want to be a piece in anyone's game. She refused them both, flatly, and she didn't just say no. She made a grand, decisive gesture to ensure she would never be put in this position again. She walked to the throne of her brother Zeus, the king of the gods, and she placed her hand on his head, a gesture of the most solemn and unbreakable oath, and she swore. She swore that she would remain a virgin for all time, that she would never marry, that she would dedicate herself entirely to her sacred duty, tending the eternal flame of the Olympian hearth. Zeus, who was not exactly known for his respect for vows of chastity, recognized the gravity of this moment. He saw the unshakable resolve in his sister's eyes. He accepted her oath, and in return he granted her a unique and profound honor. He decreed that Hestia, in place of marriage, would receive the first and best portion of every sacrifice made by mortals. Her honor would not come from a husband. It would come directly from the devotion of humanity and the respect of the gods. This is a truly radical act. In the world of the Greek gods, and indeed in the world of the ancient Greeks themselves, a woman's identity and power were almost entirely defined by her marriage. Hestia rejected this path completely. She chose her work. She chose to be defined not by her relationship to others, but by her own essential nature. This story raises a fascinating and debated question for scholars. Was Hestia's virginity a statement about female power and independence, or was it more of a practical ritual necessity? Think about it. The hearth, the center of the home, must be a neutral, stable, and inviolable space. If Hestia, as the embodiment of the hearth, were to marry, she would be drawn into the alliances and the feuds of her husband. She would take sides. Her fire, the symbolic center of unity, would become a partisan flame. Her perpetual virginity ensures her perpetual neutrality. She belongs to no one, and therefore she can belong to everyone. You look at Hestia, calmly tending the fire, and you see her not as a lonely spinster, but as a figure of immense strength and integrity. She is the calm, stable center around which the chaotic, romantic, and often violent dramas of her family can safely revolve. She has sacrificed the personal for the universal, and in doing so has carved out a niche of power that is unique on Olympus. She is not a queen like Hera, defined by her marriage, or a lover like Aphrodite, defined by her passions. She is Hestia, and that is enough.